Hello geometers, I'm going to give you an introduction to trigonometry today. And trigonometry brings together two ideas that we've been working on recently. One of them is Pythagorean theorem and right triangles, so we're going to be looking specifically at right triangles. And the second idea is similarity. We're going to be looking at triangles that are similar and using these relationships to find measurements, especially indirect measurement. So let me start out with a triangle that we know, the 30, 60, 90 triangle. So we're going to be working specifically with 90 degree, with right triangles, triangles with 90 degree angles. And here we know if this is 2, this side, the hypotenuse is 4, and the longer leg is 2 radical 3. All I'm doing is using my knowledge of the 30, 60, 90, x, 2x, x radical 3. And I'm going to define three ratios. The sine is equal to, and I'll abbreviate it as the sine, which is going to be equal to the opposite leg over the hypotenuse. The cosine, which I'll abbreviate as cos, but read as cosine, is equal to the adjacent leg over the hypotenuse. And you might be saying, what is the adjacent leg? You know what the hypotenuse is. You'll see in a minute, but it depends on what angle we're talking about. And the last trig function, the last trig ratio I'm interested in is a tangent, which we'll abbreviate as tan, and it's the opposite leg. So here we're only going to deal with legs over the adjacent leg. And now let me find the trig ratio for this particular triangle. So what is the sine of 30 degrees? That's the sine of A. Well, I've defined the sine as the opposite leg, 2, over the hypotenuse, 4. So since I'm talking about the 30 degree angle, that's my opposite leg. The sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. What's the cosine of 30 degrees? Well, the cosine of 30 degrees is going to be the adjacent leg. So here's my 30 degrees. Adjacent is the one next to it. We're either going to do the adjacent to the angle or the opposite to the angle. The adjacent is 2 radical 3 over the hypotenuse, which is 4, so I end up with radical 3 over 2. There's my cosine of 60 degrees. What about my tangent of, 30 degrees. What about my tangent of 30 degrees? Well, the tangent is defined as the opposite leg, so that's 2, over the adjacent leg, 2 radical 3, and that's going to be 1 over radical 3. I'll go ahead and rationalize that. I get radical 3 over radical 3. Now, some of you might be saying, well, how do I know? I've got 2 legs. How do I know which is adjacent and which is opposite? Well, it depends on what angle we're doing. Because after all, if I was doing the sine of 60 degrees, the hypotenuse is still going to be 2, but for 60 degrees, the opposite leg is going to be 2 radical 3. The tangent of 60 degrees. Well, I'm still going to look at the opposite leg over the adjacent leg. In this case, though, the opposite leg is 2 radical 3, opposite the 60 degree angle, and the adjacent leg is the leg that makes up the angle with the hypotenuse over 2. We're only going to be looking at trig ratios for acute angles, so we won't be using the 90 degree angle, and we won't be using anything greater than 90 degrees in this introduction to trigonometry. When you get to pre-calculus, you actually will be using some of those, but we originally defined it as these ratios. You might say, how the heck am I supposed to remember that the side is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse and the cosine is equal to the adjacent over the hypotenuse, opposite leg, by the way, I'm not going to write that, adjacent leg over the hypotenuse, and the tangent is equal to the opposite leg over the adjacent leg. And so here's a little memory trick that most trig students learn. So, ka, toa. If you were in one of my classes the other day when the pre-calculus students were in there, they knew this secret password for trigonometry. What does it mean? It's a memory way of learning this until it sticks to you. SOHCAHTOA, sine, opposite, hypotenuse. Cosine, adjacent, hypotenuse. Tangent, opposite over hypotenuse. It's a way of remembering which function is which function. Okay, well, good luck to you. You're going to have problems for homework like this. Here's a triangle that has sides 2, 4, and whatever this is, and we'll call this A. What is the tangent of A? Well, tangent of A, what is tangent? Opposite over adjacent, 2 over 4. What is the tangent of B? Opposite over adjacent, 4 over 2. There you go. There's a quick introduction to trigonometry. Read over the book. Good luck, and I will work with the problems tomorrow.